Dear black people, especially the ones in America, I've been born and raised in the ghettos and in hoods and impoverished neighborhoods and societies. That's been my life growing up. Being a black man, some people don't consider me black just because my skin might be too light. But to the most racist people in America and in the world, I'm black. It doesn't matter. I know there are different hierarchies back in the slave trade, back in the time where the house slaves were usually light-skinned and the field slaves are usually darker. But the fact is that there are factions amongst them between the two. The house slaves didn't like the field slaves, and the field slaves didn't like the house slaves. Whether they were treated better or not was beside the fact. They didn't like each other. They were divisive against each other. The master would go and divide the slaves amongst themselves, get loyalty from the women by showing the women that the only means of protection they had was to be loyal to the master, that they could not go to the man for protection or for well-being. That's a whole different subject. That's based off of the lynchment note, where a very prominent slave owner was known for breaking his slaves and having very obedient, subservient slaves. This individual would assault and rip apart very belligerent slaves to prove a point. And other people started doing the same thing to get the point across as well. And they would do that to get the women, the female slaves, to actually be loyal to the slave masters. Why do I bring this up? Because our race is the most divided race amongst itself. Throughout my life, I've never been called an Oreo by a white person. I've only been called Oreo by black people. Throughout my life, I've been called whitewash, but never by a white person. It's always been by black people. Because I speak proper English and because I don't use the N-word like a punctuation, because I don't sag my pants, because I choose not to be a stereotype. Because Clarence Thomas wasn't that way. Because Dr. Martin Luther King wasn't that way. Because Frederick Douglass wasn't that way. They didn't speak like ignorant individuals. They fought hard. They suffered. They were whipped, for those that apply to that category. And they were beat, bit, shot with fire hoses. They went through so much so that I can have the opportunity to speak like an educated individual. The way I speak has nothing to do with whether or not I'm black or white or whitewashed or educated or poor or ignorant. It has everything to do with my level of education. Well, actually, it has a lot to do with not being ignorant, because if you're ignorant, you don't speak proper. You don't speak proper English or with articulation. I learned that from blacks, whites, Latinos, Asians, all alike. Education is education, and if it's based on truth, it's everything that I want. But the reason why I thought about this this video for a long time is because I often hear the concept that no one's had it worse than the African slaves. And I always hear people say, oh, it's the white man's fault. It's the white man's fault. They'll blame the white man, the white man's fault. The white man's not oppressing us like they used to back in the 1800s, back in the 1950s. They're not oppressing us like that. They don't have that kind of influence. Before, we didn't have a voice. Our ancestors didn't have a voice back then. Now, and you think these politicians went and catered to the black community to go kiss their butt for a vote? No, because they couldn't vote. They didn't waste any time trying to go kiss our butts and come pander to us so that they can get some votes. They didn't care about blacks back then. Now they do, because we have a voice. But the thing is, we keep giving our votes to people who just stab us in the back and don't care about us. And then we blame the white men for everything that's going on wrong in the world. But the fact is that they wouldn't be in office if we wouldn't put them there. If our voices were not significant or had an impact, they wouldn't pander to us. We have a very strong voice, but we're so divided against ourselves that when somebody decides to believe differently, they're ostracized. Immediately, they're called an Uncle Tom by people who clearly don't know that Uncle Tom is a hero who gave his life in protecting and freeing many slaves. The man was a hero. But because some idiot decided to start calling people Uncle Tom, they start now repeating that same word without using their research or actually doing research, which is something that I find very common in our culture now, sadly. We're a very unlearned population. Many of us are not doing our own research. We hear that someone's racist like Trump, and automatically we start turning against them. Oh, that person's racist. And then when people ask you, give me an example, how is he racist? You can't, because you're not doing your research. You're repeating what you hear. If a person's racist, there's going to be evidence of that. There's going to be ample evidence of that. But why would people try so hard to hide the truth from you It's because they don't want you to see and think for yourself. They want you to think like a minion. Think like you're told to. Just like the slave master used to do. You don't need to think. You need to do what I tell you to do. Whenever whenever a black person in a public school is very gifted, very smart, he's often bullied, not by other races, but by his own race, for being a nerd, for being a whitewashed person, for not being black enough. I know I experienced that when I was growing up. But why is this? Because 9 times out of 10, whenever a black person is robbed out on the streets, not robbed by a white person or an Asian or a Russian, most of the time it's not even a Latino, it's another black. Yet we want to blame the white person. White men didn't force that black guy to go up and rob somebody. We are blaming everybody else without taking responsibility for our own actions. We have black-owned businesses being robbed by other black people. We're destroying ourselves. In Detroit, where the highest murder rate is happening, that's not white people killing blacks. That's not police officers killing blacks that are unarmed. That is black men shooting other black men. We are killing ourselves. They're pushing abortion on our culture because we are the number one participants of abortion. We are the number one participants in welfare. Rather than actually getting up and working like our ancestors taught us to do, more and more of us are using government assistance and abusing it, rather than actually working for our money. And we claim, oh, it's because of the white man. Yes, if you actually do the research, you will see that the welfare program was actually started by a white supremacist sociologist who was very happy about dismantling the black family by showing that the black man is a very critical key to the black family. And if you remove him, you destroy the black family. So they started incentivizing black women to be single rather than to actually get married and have a husband or have a family relationship with this man. If they didn't live with a man, especially a black man, they would get incentives to be able to survive. It was supposed to be a temporary fix to help you help yourself, but people were getting incentivized to not work. What happened when they started throwing all this money at us to not work? The unemployment rate went higher than ever because people were like, I'm getting paid great money. Why do I need to work? I'm going to get paid more money not working than working. You have any idea how much we could get out of poverty if we were to band together? I'm just thinking about this. We're so divided against ourselves. We don't help each other. We tear each other down. When one member of our community gets up there and starts succeeding, we start going, oh, that person, they're a traitor, they're whitewashed, or this and that and this and that. They don't even care about the hood. They forgot where they came from. Like, people don't want to go back and invest in people who don't care about themselves. Why am I going to invest in a hood that wants to just kill each other? That's a waste of money. You know who's had it the worst in history? Jews. I've heard so many people talk about, the millions of people who died in black slavery. Well, I was doing some research, and what I found was 12.5 African slaves were transported in the transatlantic slave trade from Africa to here. And about 12.5 million of those people were transported. And the overwhelming survived. The overwhelming numbers survived and made it to America, where they were traded off, enslaved, and then, they would breed the slaves and continue to make new slaves without having to go pay for slaves to get transported into America. Now, at first, the mortality rate of slaves dying while in transit, even ships going down, it was about 20%. And then in like the 1800s, it was like 10%. But if you just take 30% as a safe number, 20% of 12.5 million is roughly it's like 2 million. So about 2 million roughly slaves were killed during the transatlantic slave trade. During the Holocaust, in just the Holocaust, over 6 million Jews that are documented were murdered. And that's the European Jews, just European Jews. The 5 million plus that were killed as prisoners of war also are a different number from that. Now let's go back in history and look at how the Egyptians used to enslave the Jews back then, and they murdered them as well. It's documented, and if you go look and actually do the research and in ancient Egypt, you'll also see the pharaohs who murdered the firstborn of tons of Jews, like the story of Moses. You look at that story, there's actual proof of it. So Jews have been murdered and massacred and genocided more than blacks were. The numbers don't add. The numbers that the Jewish death rate has had in the history of the country, as far as being targeted, slaves, etc., it far exceeds that of us. But they're not the most poor people in the world. They're not tearing each other down. As part of the religious beliefs among the Jewish culture, they help each other. If a Jew comes and asks you for help and you're Jewish, you're obliged to help them if you're able to. It's part of their culture. They lift each other up. They build each other up. That's why in my experience, I've never once seen a Jew holding out a cup asking for money. I've never seen that. I live in Los Angeles, California. Every once in a while, I'll see a Latino asking for money, holding a cup out. Every like few people, I'll see a white person holding a cup out, asking for money. But the majority of the people I see in Los Angeles, in my experience, are people from my own ethnic culture. Asking for money, holding out money. But the Latinos that I see that are hustling on the streets, on the side of the streets, and they're washing windows, they're juggling, they're selling flowers, they're doing something to make money, they're selling something to make money. I rarely see that same kind of workmanship amongst our culture. We are blaming the white man for everything when we are still holding the gun to our own heads. If we were to unite, we can demand politicians actually do their jobs, otherwise they don't get our votes and we get them out of office. We can start putting more of our own people in college. You want to sit there and say, oh, you need to support black businesses. You're not doing much other than talking. You support businesses. Why does it got to be a black business? Why don't you just support businesses? Support the mom and pop businesses that are trying to make money, trying to do something honest. You see the kids out there selling candy bars, regardless of the little hustle line of saying, oh yeah, I'm trying to save money for camp, when you know dog and well they're just trying to make money. The fact is, they're trying to make honest money rather than steal, rather than commit crimes. I will give money all day to people when I have cash. I'll give money all day to people who are trying to work for their money rather than people just asking, can I have, and you're fully able to work. The fact is that the Jewish culture has had it the worst when it comes to genocide, when it comes to targeting, when it comes to slavery. The history shows it. The differences between the Africans that were slaves in American soil, those individuals were getting fed. Even if it was not healthy, not a whole lot, they were getting fed because they needed them to keep working. The Jews in concentration camps, they were barely getting fed anything. They were working twice as long as the slaves did. You know, they were being worked to death, literally. And people go, well, the slaves over the Africans did the same thing. No, they considered us cattle, or they considered our ancestors cattle. So they fed us to keep us alive. They gave us enough food to keep us alive. No, we didn't get steak and A1 foods. We got good food, or okay food for the most part, that actually will keep us alive and give us the energy to keep going. Even then, they would even have, for those who called themselves Christians, they were over the slaves, they would give them the Sabbath off. They would give them Sunday or Saturday, depending on what Sabbath they observed. They would give them that day off. The Jews in the Holocaust camps didn't get any Sabbath. In fact, they would work harder on the Sabbath because as a sign of disrespect. They had to sneak in their worship because they weren't allowed to actually worship. They had to sneak in reciting things from memory from the Torah. But look at them today. They run Hollywood. They run the music industry, the entertainment industry. They run so much of real estate, companies, businesses, schools. They run a lot of the world. And they're not blaming the white man. They're not blaming the Persians. They're not blaming the Egyptians. They're not blaming the Muslims for not being able to succeed, even though it's historically proven that the many Muslims and Jews have been at war with each other. But we don't see them blaming them. Like in America, they're like, no, the Muslim people in Palestine were stopping me from buying this house that I want to. They're keeping me. No. They're busy focusing on making money and thriving. Yet so many of us are always claiming that we're oppressed. We're victims. We're disadvantaged. And I'm so sick and tired of hearing all these celebrities talk about how disadvantaged our people are as they stand on a podium in front of millions of people, televised by even more people, excuse me, they're probably in front of thousands of people, being broadcasted to millions, and they get to go home to a beautiful home. They want to talk about defunding the police often, and saying that the cops are horrible and that guns are bad. We don't need guns when they're protected by armed security. We are so oppressed. Yet how many black senators do you see out there? How many black judges are there? If we're so oppressed, we shouldn't have black judges. If we're so oppressed, we shouldn't have black lawyers. If we're so oppressed, we shouldn't have black people successfully suing and winning companies just because they felt a certain way. Like the people trying to sue Sesame Street and the people trying to sue Chuck E. Cheese just to make a buck. They have no idea what it looks like inside that character helmet. We used to be a strong people. We used to be a people who would band together and unite. We used to be a people who respected the character of a person rather than the color of their skin. If you look at the Million Man March, or the March to Selma, or the Emancipation Proclamation, that wasn't just black people that were involved in that. There were white people left and right risking their necks to help us become equal because they had the power back at that time. You can tear this apart and look at it any way you want to. You can say, oh yeah, but we wouldn't be here if it weren't for them trading us. Guess what? If it weren't for the white man bringing us to, or the white settlers bringing us to America, we would be speaking Spanish or Portuguese, because our ancestors were being traded to Brazil, with the Portuguese, and also to Spain. Look around. Look at all the different black-skinned individuals from the Dominican Republic, from Cuba, from different parts of Africa. Like, they're all over the world because the slave trade was worldwide. And blacks were not the only slaves. The very first slaves on American soil were the Native Americans and the Latinos. That's true. That's a fact. But the fact is, they knew the land better than we did. Our ancestors didn't know this land. They didn't know how to navigate because they never left the continent of Africa. So they didn't know how to navigate over here on the Western Hemisphere. So if we would just stop blaming other people and start taking responsibility for ourselves and start uniting and stop calling people Uncle Toms because they have different ideologies. I'm telling you, there are Jews out there who have different beliefs and different ideologies and different ways of following the Torah. Yet they're still building together. They're still working together. They're still doing business together. They're not going over there and robbing each other like that. Yet we have small business owners. Like if Jews are out there, if a Jew decides to wear some extravagant shoes or a car or like a very luxury car or diamonds and whatnot, if they were to start wearing something like that on the street, they don't have to worry about some other Jew coming up there and robbing him and taking their stuff from him. They don't have to worry about that. But what about us? If we walk out there, if a member of our black community decides to walk out with jewels and diamonds and stuff, and he doesn't have any boys with him, he's walking by himself, he's very likely to get robbed. Not by a white person, not by an Asian, most likely not by a Latino. The reason why I say most likely not by a Latino is because there's lots of gang members out there, especially in California. The highest population of gangs are the Latinos and the blacks. That's really the majority. If you go into prison, the prisons look like that. The majority of people in prison are Latino or black. That's a fact. So, but usually Latinos don't mess around with people outside of their race. Like when it comes down to committing crimes. So you're more likely to get robbed or beat or carjacked by somebody who's a member of your own race. It's more likely to happen that way. But just imagine how powerful we could be as a people, how wealthy we could be, how we could take our own poverty levels into our own hands by demanding that these politicians start doing what they're supposed to do, or we start uniting with other people as well and get up there and start fighting and putting people in those positions and hold them accountable who actually do care and will be the voice of the people rather than the dictator of the people. That's why so many blacks are poor. That's why so many blacks don't have the opportunity to get mortgages from banks. That's why a lot of us don't get to own homes. Yeah, everything's expensive. But there's a number of blacks who actually are in charge of banks. But when they look at the data and see that us, we don't really have good, like, how many people do you know that were black that had, bills in their name, like the water bill and phone bill, when they were 5 or 6 years old? Sometimes our credit's just bad. Yeah, a number of us were getting paid crappy back in those times. But the fact is that we don't always have the best credit. It is what it is. And one of the big reasons is because public schools don't talk about how to manage credit. Even in economics, they don't teach you that stuff. But in private schools, they do. That's why when you're taught proper education about proper credit usage and credit management, you're more likely to use a credit card responsibly and manage your finances responsibly. But in public schools, they're not teaching you that. They're not teaching you to save up for things that matter. They're not teaching you how to invest in real estate or in things that will actually make you money. They teach us to get a good job so we can get a good education so we can get a good job. And they teach these private school kids, get a good education so you can own your own company and hire good employees. The mentality is different. But if we stop robbing each other, if we stop feeding into this crap that is called hip hop culture, where women are out there teaching other women to go get money, whatever you need to do, use your body to make that money and degrade yourself, and then they want to talk about how oppressed they are. They are literally, if you listen to the lyrics of a lot of this stuff, it's very stereotypical. And that's what we listen to. We read these things called urban books, which show mostly stereotypical blacks. The stuff that people that are racist see when they look at us are stereotypical. And we are indulging that stuff by watching TV and channels, watching reality TV shows where there's a stereotypical black person rather than an educated individual who happens to be black. We're feeding into that. If we stop feeding into that, we'll stop programming ourselves to be those types of people. If more fathers would stick around and actually be there for their kids when you're able to, because I know there's situations where people just can't, like fathers can't be there for the kids like they want to just because the mother of their child is just not cooperating and really doing everything they can to make their life a living hell. That happens. I know. But the fact is, we need to stop blaming other people. Because as long as we're blaming other people, we're not going to take control of our own destiny. These riots out there in the names of Black Lives Matter and George Floyd, they didn't care about George Floyd. They didn't care about Black Lives Mattering. Because if they really cared about that crap, they would have changed the laws by getting signatures. They would have marched to the Capitol and demanded that these individuals in charge of the laws start changing the laws to protect the lives of anybody from getting murdered by a cop. But they didn't do that. What did they do? We destroyed our own communities that we had to pay to replenish. We went to go get TVs. Nothing says Black Lives Matter and George Floyd was murdered like taking a TV from a mom and pop spot or getting tons of free food and free groceries that you didn't pay for, or going in and smashing up a jewelry store and taking all the jewelry and going to go sell it to make money. Nothing says civil rights protests like that. I'm surprised. Like, I don't recall Dr. King breaking in any places and saying, let's go get a TV or let's go get a brand new car and steal it so that we can get equality. No, that's what these racist individuals want you to do. They want you to act like animals so they can justify people treating you like that. We have to stop acting like animals. The only way to win a fight is through intelligence, through a calm mind, and through focus. You only make great plans when you focus and use a sound mind. If you act out of anger, you make stupid decisions. You have to have a cool head. That's why Dr. King was so smart, so effective. The man was not a saint. Let's get that straight. Dr. King was not a saint. In some ways, he was a womanizer. But nonetheless, that man is responsible for a lot of people who are willing to... He was responsible for a lot of people who were willing to risk their lives just to be free. These people stood right in front of fire hoses. They stood right in front of cops running at them full speed to beat them. They stood there and took it because freedom and equality was worth that much. Malcolm X created this movement and he realized it was going to be pointless because when he fought, they fought. And nobody cared about the news about blacks who fought getting beat up. They didn't care about that. But the world took very close attention when they saw all these innocent, good blacks getting beat by cops for walking on the street just because they wanted to vote. Peace is how you get things done. Pressure is often implied not necessarily by force, but by special tactics. Do you want to stop being poor? Start putting your money together with like-minded people. Start investing in something that's going to change your life. Stop blaming other people for why you feel the way you do. You're in control of your emotions. You're in control of your own finances. If you don't like working for somebody, find other people that don't like working for somebody, and both of you guys put your money together and invest in a future that will make you your own bosses. But so many of us aren't going to do that. Why? Because that requires hard work effort. And so many of us don't want that. And again, I'm saying so many, not all of us, because I know that there are many of us who are very hard workers. But then there are many of us who would rather get stuff given to us and get that easy money where you don't have to do anything and then get paid. That's why you're going to always have a hard life working at someone else's mercy. If more of us would unite, just like the Jews did. The Jews aren't complaining about their past. They're not even bringing it up anymore other than the Holocaust and saying, remember this. This is the result of hate. They're not victimized, or they're no longer victims in their own eyes. They are working hard to create something beautiful for their future, for their children. More of us need to start doing that too. The minute we drop the victim mentality, that's when we start changing our future. That's when we start mattering more. And that's when we have a big difference in the world. Stop seeing color. Stop blaming white people for everything, and stop using racial slurs against white people. Stop calling people all these racist names, and it's okay just because our ancestors were called that stuff. You've never been a slave. No white person alive today has owned slaves in America. So stop saying they're inherently racist, because they can just as much say the same thing about us. Please, so everyone listening, stop furthering this narrative that whites are all inherently racist, because it's not true. Racism is not something you inherit. It's something that is taught to you by other racist individuals. My mother has been assaulted and bullied and like by racist white people, and had her brother murdered by racist white cops because he slept with a white woman back in the 60s. She has many reasons to be racist, but she's not, because she knows that there's bad people in every culture. There's stereotypes and there's educated individuals. And I'm telling you, one thing that often happens to us to show you that nobody wants to be part of this lifestyle is once black people become wealthy, what do? The first thing they do, especially when they get a lot of money, they move right out of the ghetto. They don't keep their home. They move right out of the ghetto into an area that happens to be predominantly white. A suburb. They move to nicer areas because they're safer. We can increase the own value of our own real estate if we make our neighborhoods safer. If we stop being the stereotypical gang member, yeah. If crime drops, the amount of police in an area will drop as well, because they don't need that many cops because crime is dropped. Think about Calabasas in California. Think about how in like the highest end areas throughout the world, throughout the United States. They have the lowest amount of cops there because the crime is the lowest. But getting it there, the area leading to there is actually where all the cops are going to be. So if you want to stop getting arrested, we got to take control of our own destiny. We need to spend more time in school, spend more time living with our parents to prepare for a life of living on our own. We're in such a hurry to get out of mom and dad's house that we don't prepare for that journey. We just end up, as soon as we're 18, boom, I'm out. I'm not living with mom and dad anymore. And then we spend the rest of our lives trying to catch up. I'm not trying to talk down to anybody, but I'm just so tired of this victim mentality of saying we're disadvantaged because of the color of our skin. This is the greatest time to be a black person. And the people that are trying to feed you the lies, they know it. Don't buy into the lies. We're strong. We were created to be strong. Just like any other person, we have the right to be happy as well. Don't be a victim. Don't draw this poison that people are after you to get you. That's all in your head if you let it be. Or you can make it your reality by living that lie.